Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
For decades, the United States was operated and has operated a very low-skilled immigration system.
The obstructionist Democrats would like us not to do it, but believe me, we have to close down our government. We're building that wall.
I am an immigrant, like Alfonso and Alejandro, my compadres, like Gael, like Salma, and like many, many of you. I think that the greatest thing our art does and our industry does is to erase the lines in the sand. We should continue doing that.
Like everyone in this room and everyone watching at home, we are dreamers. We grew up dreaming of one day working in the movies. Dreams are the foundation of Hollywood, and dreams are the foundation of America.
Well, just a few hours ago, curtains came down at the Kodak Theatre in Los Angeles, the venue for the 90th Oscars, the biggest honor in Hollywood and arguably one of the most significant exports from the United States to the world. The U.S. movie industry is worth over $120 billion. It is the world leader in cultural exports with an 8% market share. That's according to the U.S. National Endowment for the Arts. That's not all. The U.S. runs a trade surplus with China when it comes to cultural exports. But President Trump wants more. Last week, he slapped tariffs on steel and aluminum imports by the U.S. He took to Twitter to defend the move, saying, and I quote, "We must protect our country and our workers. Our steel industry is in bad shape. If you don't have steel, you don't have a country," end of quote. Many world leaders like Angela Merkel, Justin Trudeau, fear that a trade war would not hurt just the United States, but the global economy as a whole. Perhaps the most harshest response has come in from Jean-Claude Juncker, the president of the European Commission. He told the German TV channel, and I quote, "We will now impose tariffs on motorcycles, the Harley-Davidson, on blue jeans, Levi's, on bourbon. We can also do stupid. We also have to be this stupid," end of quote. The tariff on steel and aluminum will not have a major impact on India, which accounts for only 2% of U.S. exports. Nonetheless, shares of Vedanta, JSW Steel and Tata Steel took a sharp hit in trade today. That's not all. Trump has been taking a dig at India for high tariffs on Harley-Davidson bikes. In a latest tweet, he said, and I quote, "When a country taxes our products coming in at, say, 50%, and we say tax the same product coming into our country at 0%, not fair or smart," end of quote. But I must also point out that the U.S. runs a small trade deficit with India compared to its deficit with countries like China and Mexico. Now, all of this leaves us with some key questions. Should India fear tariffs on our major exports to the United States like IT services? Will China and Europe retaliate and impose tariff restrictions on American goods? And will the current trade skirmish escalate into a full-blown trade war that will hurt the global economy? And finally, Donald Trump claimed on Twitter that it's easy to win trade wars, but will America really emerge winner? Joining us to discuss all of this and more, Jayant Dasgupta, former Indian ambassador to the WTO, and Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the US. Mr. Dasgupta and Ms. Shankar, appreciate you joining us here on the show. If I can start by asking you, Mr. Dasgupta, what you make of the current response of the U.S. government by imposing tariff restrictions on steel and aluminum. Do you believe that this is a trade skirmish that could have the potential to escalate into a full-blown trade war?
Yes, I do think this has the potential to escalate into a major trade war, which can bring about a lot of misery and loss of jobs, economic stagnation, even recession in the worst case scenario. And what has brought it about, I can't really put my finger on it, because the US gets aluminium, for instance, at cheap rates from Canada, which has aluminium, as you know, is enormously energy intensive. And Canada has a lot of cheap hydropower. So it produces aluminium, which the US uses in large quantities. And as far as steel is concerned, the US exports more steel to Canada than Canada exports to the US. And the US needs steel
Right.
in its construction industry, in automotives, in a host of other industries. And
Yeah.
there are only about 140,000 people who are engaged, who are employed in the US steel industry. So they stand to lose a lot more if the price war, if the tariff war escalates.
Right. So, Mr. Dasgupta, what is this then really about? Is this about China then? Because if I were to pick up the quote from Peter Navarro, director of the White House National Trade Council, he says that China has tremendous overcapacity in both aluminum and steel. They flood the world market, and this impacts basically, what happens to the economy in the US. Now, is this about China, or is this also about renegotiating NAFTA, which is currently underway?
I think it has several dimensions. China may be the trigger which has brought it about, but the US is the largest importer of steel in the world, importing about 35 million tons from many countries, including Mexico, Canada, Brazil, South Korea, Japan, etc. So in the case of the WTO, you can't impose unilateral tariffs on just one country unless it is through trade defense mechanism like anti-dumping or safeguard or countervailing duties. And the rules are very clear.
Sure.
If China is considered to be dumping or selling below cost or damaging the US industry, there are very clear-cut WTO rules which the US has been using quite frequently in the past, and it can use it again.
Right.
So India has also used it against China and a few other countries on steel. So that route is still open, but this decision of the US to unilaterally impose tariffs on steel and aluminium is not justified.
Not justified in your opinion. Meera Shankar, I've been speaking with several people who track this, including the former Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, Montek Singh Gandawali, and he seemed to suggest that, the bark of the US is louder, but the bite is a little less hard. But given what we have seen from President Trump in the flurry of tweets and the action imposed on aluminum and steel, do you believe that this, as Mr. Dasgupta is also pointing out, has the potential to escalate into a full-blown trade war?
Yes, I mean, it could certainly trigger trade friction on a scale that we haven't seen in recent years. But we have to wait and see what the actual order is, because right now what Mr. Trump has done is to announce his intention to impose the tariffs, and the actual tariff orders will be passed in April, around the second week of April.
Right.
So I think we have to wait and see what is the actual order, how do countries respond to it. But the fact is that it's really hitting not China so much, the steel tariff, because China's steel exports to the US have declined in recent years because of US action, duties which they had imposed. And it goes much more to neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. Their exports and also their domestic demand has been rising. They do export more aluminium, but Canada is the country which is going to be worst affected, because I think they have a total of 16% of U.S. Imports of steel come from Canada, and over 40% of aluminum imports come from Canada. So, this is something which is going to hit Canada, then Brazil, and other partners. So, and it's not as though it's something on which there is a consensus within even Trump's own administration. I mean, the national, the head of their National Economic Council, Gary Cohn, was believed to have argued very strongly against it, and there are rumors that he may also step down. Yeah, and members of the Republican Party themselves are rather worried about this action of Mr. Trump, because traditionally the Republicans have been, for freer trade, whereas the Democrats find themselves in the unusual position, and the labor associations of welcoming President Trump's move or intention to announce these tariffs. So it is something which undermines
right. I want to talk about
the international trading system established by the WTO, because he's used national security grounds for imposing the tariffs.
Absolutely. Yes, he has. But I want to ask both of you about the implications on India. And Mr. Dasgupta, let me start by asking you, for almost 6 or 7 times the president has referenced India in the context of high duties on Harley-Davidson, for instance. He, in fact, talks about a call that was made by Prime Minister Modi suggesting that India has brought down tariffs on Harley-Davidson. I asked the BJP if, whether the government would actually clarify if indeed the Prime Minister had made that specific reference to the US, and they said that this was a matter of interpretation on the part of the President of the United States, and that India's trade policy is not dictated by specific instances. But what could be the implications of retaliatory action that President Trump has threatened for India?
I think we have to look at the interpretation of reciprocity. If a very large importer, for instance, says that if I am importing motorcycles at 0 duty, then we must also have access in your market at 0 duty. If that is the concept of reciprocity, I'm afraid it is totally wrong, and it does not cannot stand the scrutiny of the WTO. India cannot just, buckle down to pressure and keep reducing tariffs from howsoever an important partner it is demanded from. It has to be justified, it has to be rationalized. And one of the reasons why we have had a burgeoning auto industry in the past 2 decades is because we have had reasonably high tariffs. Now, if you look at the Western countries and the advanced countries, they have also had a high tariff wall in their initial phase for 40, 50 years, which has helped them to industrialize, and then they have reduced their tariffs. So it is, there's a very famous book written by Ha Jun Chang, which the caption is "Kicking Away the Ladder." Now, you can't kick away the ladder after having climbed on the curve of development and then prevent other people from doing it.
Okay. Right. So, Meera Shankar, where does this leave India? And what do you? Yes, Mr. Dasgupta, go ahead, and then I'll go to Ms. Shankar.
No, I just wanted to mention that Harley-Davidson, of course, this. Even President Bush had asked for reduction of tariffs. But just reducing tariffs for Harley-Davidson, that too for very large motorcycles, that is perhaps not feasible. If we have to do it, we have to do it for all countries. And there are many other manufacturers. So it is going to be a comprehensive decision. But the whole concept is about, the U.S. running trade deficits against certain countries. And, it's not about winning in respect of each country and saying that we have a trade surplus against China, India, European Union, Japan, etc.
But that's the way that the president seems to be looking at it. That's the way that he seems to be looking at it. But that's the way that he seems to be looking at it. But Meera Shankar, let me end then by asking you, what are the... What are the implications for India specifically, not just on the Harley matter, but in response to what we're seeing happen in the US? And for instance, I mean, how worried should the Indian IT industry be, if at all?
They have been worried, I think, ever since President Trump took over. As of now, they really haven't made any drastic changes, except in terms of executive orders, making the implementation more stringent. So, they say it can't be used for low-skilled workers, and merely having a kind of being a software, low-level software developer is not considered a specialized skill. The companies would have to establish that the person they are sending has specialized skills. But there are different draft proposals in the Congress proposing that, minimum wage be raised by varying degrees, some more than some less, and so on. So there are a number of proposals. If they come together, it could mean a serious challenge to the way our companies do business. As far as Harley-Davidson is concerned, I do recall that this was something which was discussed also when President Bush was there. And there was a kind of an understanding that it will be, we will reduce tariffs a little bit on Harley-Davidsons, and the U.S. will also remove obstacles to our mango exports. But by the time, all the phytosanitary and other stipulations that the U.S. put on mango exports, Indian mango exports were finished, I think they now sell at several, they're so expensive that you don't see any Indian mangoes in the U.S. market. So in effect, it really didn't open the U.S. market to Indian mangoes. And the mangoes you get there from the other countries in Latin America are pretty tasteless. So, that's why Americans always wonder what's the big hoo-ha about mangoes, because they've never tasted proper mangoes.
About mangoes.
But on the other hand,
so the Harley in exchange for mangoes deal didn't work out.
No, but it has to be also that there are ways to access the Indian market. You have to be practical rather than get into theoretical, posturing. There are ways to access the Indian market.
Sure.
After all, Mercedes, BMW, all the luxury cars are here. And they do it on the basis of assembly line operations. They're not manufacturing in India, but they are assembling in India. So they import the components on which duty is less, and then they assemble the finished product in India. And that's the easy way to do it, because, you have to look at practical ways in which you can access the Indian market, just as we have to look practically at how we adapt our strategies to access the U.S. market.
To do business in the U.S.
But
Mr.
the only
Dasgupta,
thing is that for us, the U.S. still remains our largest export market, and therefore it's very important for us.
Right. It is very important for us. Mr. Dasgupta, I'll give you the final say, sir, in about a minute. Do you see this now moving towards the WTO? I mean, we've got the EU Commissioner also threatening retaliatory measures, saying that, look, if the Americans want to be stupid, we can be stupid as well. The IMF, of course, is cautioning President Trump, saying that this is going to hurt not just the US, it's going to hurt the global economy. Do you believe that this is a matter that is possibly headed now to the WTO?
I think, as Ambassador Meera Shankar has pointed out, there is still a few weeks left before the Federal Register notice comes out and the duties are raised. And hopefully, there would be wiser counsel which would prevail upon the U.S. administration, and they would not take this very extreme step. Even the DG WTO, in a very, very uncharacteristic statement, has warned the U.S. in a very polite manner that this has the potential to take things out of control. The only thing which I can say in the end is that this step is going to upset a lot of industrial workers across the world. But most of all, we also have to recall what happened when the U.S. imposed 30% tariffs on steel in 2002. It lost the case in November 2003. The share index plummeted in the U.S. and the bond yields went up. So there were repercussions in the U.S. Also, which were felt by the industry, by many industries across the board. Yes. So this decision is going to hurt the U.S. very much. And there is a very recent article of the Nobel laureate Paul Krugman, which also says that the US can't
Krugman, yes.
escape from this unscathed. It will bear very deep scars if it goes ahead and raises the tariffs. So the wiser
we
counsel
will have to
should
wait to
prevail.
see
He
if that
should
is
be
indeed the
advised.
case. So
And Gary Cohn, I hope he is not left yet. Yes. So apart from
we
Gary Cohn, I
understand
think
from
the Wall
press
Street
reports that he may be threatening to.
Journal has
So-
also, I think, criticized it. Yes.
well, yes, most publications have.
Yes.
But for now, Mr. Dasgupta and Meera Shankar, appreciate you joining us here to discuss the possibility of a trade war that's been triggered by the U.S. action on import tariffs on steel and aluminum and what that could mean for the global economy and specifically for India. We'll take a short break. Don't go anywhere. The news continues.